Okay, for this recording, we're going to do something a little more practical based on the introduction that I've shown you here. So let's go ahead and do create a new file. And again, this would be called myloop2.c. And the objective of this time is to do a practical example for using while using a while loop. What I'm going to do is an example of accumulation. Okay, so example accumulation. Okay, you could do it for a running total or something like that. So this could be a really good one. And today's date is the 28th, 03/28, 2020. And there you have it. So let's go ahead and start with the directive to include our library here. stdio.h. And we're going to do everything in main for now. And then return 0 and the program. So let's save this as myloop2. Okay. Let me just copy this and save it in the same directory as I saved the other one. So this would be a .c program. Okay. All right. So here's what I want to do. First, let me break down the program into the three sections that I showed you earlier, which is the loop priming and the loop condition and finally the loop control. So you need to have these ingredients to handle a while loop, okay? Good. All right, so what do we want? We want this loop to accumulate some values, maybe and give me an average. How's that? And we want to do this until we say we're done. Okay. While loop is perfect for that. So as long as I don't know how many times I'm going to loop, a while loop will be an excellent solution for that. So I'm going to do the same thing. Int choice equals 0. This here, this variable will be part of the loop control, condition, and control. Okay, so I'm going to use that for that purpose. Okay, now I need the variables that I need for the program. Maybe something like this. Counter, and I need a counter, int counter equals 0. Set it to 0. The reason is, if I'm going to find the average of an accumulated total, I might as well use the counter as to how many elements I've accumulated and divide by the counter. Okay? And just make sure you don't divide by 0. Okay? So what is it I'm going to accumulate? Float accumulator. And I'm going to call it simply accum. Now, it's a good idea to initialize your accumulator. Especially, I mean, think about it. If you're going to go trick or treat, you have an empty bag, right? A burlap bag full. You want to fill it up with candy. You're going to go from house to house. Let's say you went to 10 homes. And one house you collected 5 candies, the other one 3, the other one 0. It doesn't matter. The bottom line is you're going to go ahead and count all the candies you have at the end of the day and divide by the number of homes you had, right? And that will give you an average per house. It's the same thing here. But remember, you started with an empty bag. If your bag had some candy already from last year, you're going to get the wrong count. So make sure you initialize the bag right here. Okay? All right, so now the loop condition. So let me just get this a little closer here. And the loop condition will be based on a while loop, right? So while choice equals 0, then go ahead and do the loop body. The loop control will be inside the loop body, okay? So notice the curly braces, the beginning of the loop and the end of the loop, okay? So what we're going to ask the user to do? Well, we're going to ask them to enter the number of candies, maybe, right? Something like this. So maybe printf, how many candies did you get from this house? Okay? Well, with my float, I could have 5.6 candies, anything you want. Or just enter a grade. Something like this, if you want. Enter a grade. So it's up to you. It's up to you what is it you want to accumulate. Just make sure it is of type float. Okay? So in my case, enter a float value. So I'm going to make it generic here. And then you're going to scanf. This time %f and %accum. So you're going to store it in the accumulator. So now remember, right? Maybe not. Maybe, here's what we're going to do. Because then you're going to write over what's in the accumulator. Let's do this. Float num or quantity or value. Let's do this. Value is better. And this one you don't need to initialize. And the reason is because you're going to set up the value right here. Value. Much better this way. Okay? Now, what can you do? Now, that's the number of candies you just collected. Now, what you could do is you could say something like this. Accum equals accum plus value. So if the accumulator was already 0, you're adding that value to it. Now, the new value for the accum will be 3 candies or whatever the numbers you entered. Perfect. Now, how about the loop control? Well, the loop control, it's going to be a process of asking the user to enter a choice. Do they want to continue adding more float values? Printf, enter 0 to add another number. Okay? Or to accumulate. You could do something like this. Right? So, and, sorry. Yes. So, or any other value to exit. Exactly. So this is how you're going to control it. So how do you do this? Scanf, %f, and %choice here. Remember, choice, the variable choice, is what will get you or keep you in the loop because you're evaluating that condition right here. So if this remains 0, then you will remain in the loop. You'll be asked to again accumulate. Excellent. So now let's see what happened after you've decided at any given time during runtime to enter 0. Well, maybe now you're out of the loop. Printf. Maybe print the, what do you have? The total accumulated equals, right? %.1f. Let me just round it up to 1 decimal point. Remember, you're accumulating float numbers, and this is the place to put the accumulator. Okay? So let's test it out quickly, and then we'll add the average to this. So, but before I do anything, remember, I wanted to use counter later on to divide the accum by it. But for now, we will come back to the counter in a minute. So let's make sure that we can actually accumulate. So let's compile and run. And it's going to ask me enter a float value. Okay, I'm going to enter 2.2. And it's going to ask me 0 to accumulate, or so if I say 1, I'm no longer going to accumulate. So my accumulation is only 2.2. Let's run it again this time. And run. And I'm going to enter again 2.2. And I'm going to hit this time 0. And I'm going to put another 2.2. So we got a 4.4. Let me put a 1 here to get out. And sure enough, my accumulator is 4.4. As you can see, I am in control as to when and how I stay in the loop, right? So as long as I enter 0, I will be entering more values. If I don't enter 0, any value, I'm out of the loop. Okay? So let's do it again. Let me run it. Let's accumulate a whole bunch of numbers, right? So 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, right? And 4, right? So I added 1, 2, 3, 4. And now I'm going to hit 1. And there you go, 10.0. Right? So that's the accumulated value. Now, what if we wanted to display the average? If you want to do that, right, you're going to divide by some counter. How many items do you have? Here's what you're going to allow. This is going to allow you to track the number of values entered during the running of the program. That's what we want this for. Okay? All right, well, let's see it in action. So what you need to do as soon as you entered a value right here, do it right here before the loop control, increment the counter. So how are you going to do this? Counter equals counter plus 1. Okay? Some people might write counter plus plus. Okay, so what would this allow me to do? This will allow me to divide the accum by the counter. So printf, the average value from this set is %.1f slash n. Now you have to be careful with this division. You do not want an integer division. Now as long as accum is a float, that's fine. I can divide by counter. Counter is an integer, but accum is a float. This is not an integer division, so we're good. Well, now let's see how this works. So compile and run. Okay. And we're going to enter 100, 0, 12.3. And this time I'm going to stop here. I'm going to hit 1 to get out. And here's my average. So total accumulated was 112.3. And my average, based on these two extreme values here, is 56.2, somewhere in the middle, right? And there you have it. So this is a good reason to use a while loop, especially when you don't know how many times you're going to loop. Can we do another example where we do actually know how many times we're going to loop? Okay? And yes, we could do that. So let's go ahead and do another example. And this time, I'm going to call this one my loop 2.c, and we're going to accumulate for a predefined set, which means we know its size, where we know its size. Now, a good place to do this is probably in an array. Okay? So we're going to store them in an array. So we know how big the array is going to be. So again, now you could do it any other way you want, but you don't necessarily need an array if you're just simply accumulating. But let's say you're accumulating 5 times, and that's your set. It's got 5 numbers. Then that's fine. In my case, I want to use an array so I can actually not only store the numbers in the array, but retrieve them. So I could use the loop for that. And today's date is 03/28/2020. And include stdio.h int main. We're going to do everything in main for now. Okay. System pause. And return 0. Now, what if I had an array? Let's say I have an array of numbers. Float my nums. And we're going to have 5 items in it. So now we have an array that will hold 5 floats. Okay? So this isn't going to be any different. So we could use the accum as well. So we could do a float accum, but make sure the accumulator is 0. 0.0 to be precise. Now, you could leave it as 0, but this is much better habit. And in my case, I know that I will be going to 5. That is the size. Will I need a counter? Yeah, let's set up a counter. So int counter, and let's set it to 0. So we're going to use that now to get us out. So we're going to use the counter this time to test or evaluate the loop and control the loop. So this is your loop, what do you call it? Priming. So we're priming right here. Okay? So, how do you set up a loop like this? You could do something like this. While counter is less than 5. So we're going to go from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. The loop control will be counter equal counter plus 1. Okay? That will be your loop control. That allows you to get out. Okay? If that's the case, now how do we fill our numbers? Well, we could do something like this. Maybe something like this. Printf. Enter a value. Okay. Scanf. And I'm going to go ahead and do it right here, %f and %, and I'm going to enter it to each member of the array. My nums I, or counter. In our case, it's counter. Counter is your index. Okay, so counter at 0 initially, that's where you're going to enter it. By the time you come back, counter will be 1. Great, that's your index. Right? You come back again, counter will be 2. Exactly, so you're going to have my nums 2 at index 2. Okay, so while we're doing this, probably is a good idea to accumulate. Accum equals accum plus my nums counter. Before you increment the counter, obviously. Okay, so you are talking about the same element within the array. Perfect. Can we display the content of the array using a while loop? So this here will accumulate. So this loop here, its purpose is to accumulate as you enter data and to populate the array. Can we view the content of the array? And the answer is yes. We could do that right now. We're using a while loop. So while, okay. Now remember, before you do anything, you're going to have to reset counter back to 0. So you need to reset counter. Why? Because by the time you leave, counter is no longer 0, right? By the time you leave this while loop. So counter equals 0. That's your first order of the day. Now, do another while loop similar to what we just did. Counter is less than 5. Then you have a loop again. Well, guess what? You're going to use the same thing to get out. So how are you going to get out? You need counter equals counter plus 1. Without this, you will be stuck in the loop. right? So this, at one time or another, right, will reach 5, right? And it will kick you out because counter 5 is not less than 5. It's equal to 5. So the condition will be false. Okay, but we know we started at 0. Now we could display. So printf, and we could display the values. So I could do something like this: my nums and %d, just for giggles here, so you can actually see what's inside the index, how it moves, and then %.1f / n, so we can actually see what's in the array, how it's formatted. We could do counter here as one of the arguments, and the other one is my nums counter. Okay, so I want to see the content of the array. That's fine. Okay, so great. So let me save this before anything bad happens to my program. So this is my loop 2. Let me copy here. That's what happens when I write code on the fly here. And this would be right there, my loop 2, save. Oh, we're going to call it, no, my loop 3. That's probably, I forgot that I had my loop 2. I like operating systems that catch this stuff before writing over what I already had. So .c. There, no problem. No news is good news. All right, so now I know this is going to display the content of the array. What else can I do? Well, while we're at it, go ahead and display the total accumulated. So printf total, or accumulated total, equals %.1f, then /n, and then you could say something like this: average for the set, or average value for the set, you could do an equal as well, %.1f /n. You could do all of these in one line here, and that would be accum, and that would be accum divided by counter. You've already incremented counter where you need it to be. Okay, so by now, by the time you exit, counter is at 5, and that's indeed what you want to divide by. Okay, all right, so let's see how it works. So compile and run. And forgot to put a plus here. There you go. Compile and run. Okay, so we're going to enter a value. Now remember, this time it will loop 5 times. You have no choice. You have set the looping condition where you actually know how many times you're going to be looping, and you can control it with the counter, incrementing every time you're inside the body of the loop. So that's fine. 34, 66.2, 17, 19.3. So I'm on my 4th number. Now I'm on my 5th number, which is 4.2. And sure enough, I retrieve what's in the array. It got stored in the array. Num0 had 34.0, etc. And then the total, and then the average. Okay, I hope this was instructive in terms of how to use a loop, not knowing how many times you're going to be looping, versus one where you know how many times you're going to be looping. You didn't have to use an array for this example, but I did it just so I can reuse the while loop to access an array.